Well, Magic Round 10 is upon us, and with that magic, we've got half our teams disappearing. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video from A Man Talks NRL SuperCoach. Round 10 has been absolute carnage this week, recording this on a Tuesday night. Teamless Tuesday has thrown up some mega surprises. The judiciary has thrown up some big changes to our team, so there's a lot of things to get through. So let's get straight into it. But before we do, if you guys do like the video and my content, would really appreciate a thumbs up, and do please consider subscribing to the channel already if you haven't done so, as I'll be putting more videos out through the 2021 SuperCoach season. I will also upload the audio of this video onto Spotify. Probably haven't made that clear before that I am uploading the audio of these videos onto Spotify if anyone wants to listen outside of YouTube. But let's get into the trade targets and preview for round 10. First off, quick shout out to Single Malt Only, or James, for topping our overall group league in round 9 with a massive score of 1,525. So really great score from him. Guys, if you haven't joined this group already, I'll put the code in the link below. Just an overall group league, just to kind of see how we all go throughout the season. And in our top 5, I've got Jackson, James, Thomas, Eric, and Matt, all sitting in the top 400 overall ranking wise. Jackson is on 42. I think he was 24th last week, so he's had a bit of a dip, but still, rank 42 is doing better than the rest of us, and definitely me. So hopefully Jackson continues it on for the rest of the season. So firstly, I thought I'd go through kind of a bit of a summary of the round 10 Teamless Tuesday, and there's quite a bit of important things to get into. Firstly, for the Tigers, there was a lot of shuffling around with some of their key players, especially with a lot of SuperCoach relevance. Adam Dewey, who has been killing it so far at 5'8", he's actually been named in the centres, which is really strange to see. Jacob Little has been named at number 9, so as a result, Jake Simpkins has dropped out of the 17 altogether, which is a big blow to any new owners of him. Sean Blaw, who was a big preseason cheapie prospect for the Tigers, he's been named on the bench for them, so that does hopefully mean that he will kind of, start being able to pull some good scores together and hopefully be a good cash cow option moving forward. Jock Madden has also been named on the bench, and he is listed, I think, as a halfback cheapie, so one to keep an eye on as well moving forward. Unfortunately, that means Stefano Otokamanu and Zach Senior also out of the 17. So those are the main kind of key SuperCoach implications. I think Adam Dewey is a big one here. Fortunately, with the Tigers, though, they do play the first game of the round, so we will be able to wait until the final team sheet to see if they actually run out in this way. It does seem a little bit strange, so maybe Dewey gets switched to number 6 pre-kickoff. There has been some talk that potentially this is kind of like a bit of a smoke and mirrors for Luke Brooks being dropped, so I think definitely something to keep an eye on is the West Tigers team list. Unfortunately, they do play first up in the round. On the Knights, who they do play, no major changes with their team. I guess the most notable ones would be Lockie Fitzgibbon has still been named to start in the number 12 role, which has got Connor Watson on the bench and Mitch Barnett starting at lock. I'll touch on those players in the next part of the video. We've got for the Raiders, Ryan James has been named back on the bench in the 17. Hudson Young is starting. I think Ryan Sutton has got a 1 to 2 week injury. Jordan Rapana has also been named out of the 17. So that's something to consider if anyone had jumped on him. That does see Semi Valemi move into the 17 for the Raiders, but I don't think too many people will be having Raiders players. And I think given the carnage that's occurred this round, I think Ryan James probably won't be the first person that a lot of people are going to be selling, but it's not ideal that he's on the bench. For the Sharks, big news here for them was that Andrew Fifita is going to make his return to the NRL scene this season, so to my memory, I think at least, and he'll be named on the bench. But aside from that, I don't think there's too many other relevant Sharks players at the moment, aside from, say, Sean Johnson, but I don't think many people are going to be jumping on him anytime soon. On the Rabbitohs side, we've got Adam Reynolds has been named to ahead of schedule back in the 17, so that's a big plus for the Rabbitohs. And Jai Arrow has been named on the bench after starting last week, basically doing a direct swap with Liam Knight, but this does help the Rabbitohs' fortunes after getting absolutely pumped by the Storm, having their the number 7 back in the 17. On the Roosters side of things, in terms of key ins, we've got Victor Radley, Sitili Tupanua, Sam Walker have all been named in the 17. Sisu Takiaho has also been named in the 17, but unfortunately Takiaho has been named on the bench, and it does look like he's lost the goal kicking duties to Sam Walker and Adam Kieran, who's also been able to take goal kicking duties during games. So that really does kind of bode bad news for Takiaho. I think that goal kicking really was a big plus for him, but being named on the bench doesn't really help his fortunes. Again, I think he's going to be one of those players, though, given the carnage as that's what's happened this week, he's probably going to be hanging around in our teams for a little bit longer. Definitely would keep an eye on Sam Walker though. He has looked like he's carrying a bit of a knock to his shoulder and also his ankle. So just keep an eye on the team list before. I think they play on the Friday or Saturday. I'm not sure, can't quite remember. Definitely keep an eye on the team list to see if you want to be holding Sam Walker or potentially trading him out if he is getting rested. I still think a game against the Cowboys, if he does play, is a very safe play in your 17 though. So I don't think I'd be rushing that decision. Definitely be looking at further late mail during the week. On the Eel side, a bit of shifting here is that Reed Marnie and Nathan Brown have both been named to start despite their injuries, and Reed Marnie failing his HIA during his game last week, but he has been named to play. The key out for the Eels is Dylan Brown, who has got that suspension for that tackle on Drew Hutchinson as well. So Jacob Arthurs, who's Brad Arthur's son, has actually been named at 5'8", but at the time of recording, I think they still haven't met the NRL bubble protocols. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on as well if they actually do have Arthur's play in the 17 this week. But as of Tuesday evening, that's how they've been named. For the Storm, a lot of big changes here, and I think this is going to be one that's really going to be affecting a lot of teams this week. Ryan Pappenhausen, he's been named on an extended bench, so he was tipped to return this week, and he has been named, I think, in the number 19 jersey, but I have a feeling that they're going to do a bit of a late switching and that he's going to be named in the starting number 1 role. Nicho Hynes at the moment has been named at the number 1 spot. Riley Jacks has been named number 6, and this is all due to Cam Munster and Harry Grant both sustaining 2-week injuries. That was just the news for that just came out earlier today. Really big Supercoach implications given how highly owned Cam Munster is and how I think sought after Harry Grant was in the past couple of weeks. I think they're both obviously big losses for the Storm and for Supercoach purposes as well. Missing 2 weeks at best, and then having State of Origin loom up soon, I think makes both these guys sells. What is interesting with the Storm lineup though is that they've got Kenny Bromwich lining up at hooker. They've got Tui Kamakamika on an edge, Riley Jacks number 6, Nicho Hynes at number 1, as I mentioned. I do feel like there's going to be some late switching, and that Pappenhausen will go to number 1, Nicho Hynes number 6, Tyson Smoothie, who has been named on the bench, I expect him to go to hooker, and then they'll just shift the forwards around. Unfortunately for the Storm, though, they play like the second last game of the round, so it's going to be really late to make any kind of late changes. If you're owning Pappenhausen, I think he's probably still okay to hold and play in your 17, but I think you will have to be willing to take that risk. On the Dragon side of things, the main change for them is Michaela Ravalawa has come back from his suspension and will take his place on the wing in replacement of Matt Fiagnai, who dropped out of the 17 altogether. He was the one who actually put in the good performance last week and not Max, but unfortunately he's dropped out of the side altogether with Ravalawa coming back. In terms of the big outs for this week as well, Kurt Capel is going to miss this week, after failing his HIA last week. So that's obviously going to hit a lot of Supercoach teams, mine included. And probably the biggest one of all is Dave Fifita has failed at the judiciary, and so he's going to be missing 2 weeks through suspension, and this is coming probably at the worst time when everyone else has still got other fires they're trying to put out. Now we've got an $860,000 problem in our second row forward with Dave Fifita missing the next 2 weeks. So this blends nicely to this next section where I'm talking kind of around second row forwards and the kind of trade considerations. So I think coming into this week before Dave Fifita news, it was all about Mitch Barnett and even Angus Crichton to an extent, and what should we be doing with these guys. So I'll quickly touch on Dave Fifita first. So as I mentioned, he's priced at $850k, and he's got an average of 101. He's by far and away the best second row forward in the game so far, but missing these next 2 weeks is really going to be tough. And I think it begs the question is obviously, is he a sell or is he a hold? I can understand why people want to hold. He's obviously the best second row forward in Supercoach so far this season, and probably going to stay that way for the rest of the season. $850k, that's a lot of money to be paying to bring him back, when he eventually does come back into the team. And you don't want to be burning trades to kind of be swapping out these gun players. I'm leaning towards the sell camp though. There's a few reasons for that. He is $850k, that's a lot of money to be leaving on your bench for the next couple of weeks as well. When there's guys like Isaiah Papali'i, Ryan Madison, Tohu Harris, even guys like James Fisher-Harris, like you can make a lot of money just doing that single trade. Plus these guys will be able to score the points that Fifita's not going to be able to score while he's suspended. Also with Origin looming, you'd expect Fifita would be involved for the Maroons. So he'll miss 3 of the next 4 games because he'll miss rounds 10 and 11. He'll play in round 12 versus Sharks when he comes back from suspension, but then he'll miss round 13 due to being in Origin camp. And then he'll have to back up in round 14, which I think they've got. I think the Titans play on the Saturday, and the game of State of Origin will be on the Wednesday. So he's got Thursday, Friday, and Saturday morning to recover. And also depends how his minutes are used in Origin. That would impact his ability to back up in round 14. He would play round 15 and round 16, but I think round 15 is against the Roosters, so it's kind of a tough match. And then I think 16 is against the Sea Eagles. So again, the way that the Sea Eagles are playing, a bit of a better opponent, although I think with Fifita, the way that he's going, the opponent is a little bit less important, I think, than say like a back. So he'll miss round 10, 11, play in round 12, miss round 13, potentially might miss or have reduced minutes in round 14 after backing up from Origin. 15, toughish game. 16, toughish game. He'll miss then round 17 after being in the next Origin camp, and then he might have to back up in round 18 where the Titans play on a Friday. So he'd only be having the 1 or 2 day rest from the State of Origin game to be playing in round 18. That's a lot of missed games. I think that he's going to be, in this next little period. So I think 850k is a lot of money to have, just say, to play with confidence in round 12, and then potentially some minutes in round 14, play in round 15 and 16, and maybe some minutes in 18. So that's about, at best case, he might play 5 games, at worst 3, and obviously his minutes might be managed, so he might play 3.5 to 4 games, if you want to call it that. So maybe 4 games out of the next 9. That's a lot of games that he'd be missing. So I think for that price that he's at, I think he's a sell, given how much you can get out of that money by trading him out. And obviously, yes, he is going to be, you will be burning trades to get him out and back in, but I think you can really capitalize on the points and the cash as well. So that would be my general thought on Fifita in terms of whether you hold or sell. As to who you want to trade him to, obviously he's the top price second row forward, so you can basically go down to anyone. Obviously, like Isaiah Papali'i would probably be the obvious candidate if you don't have him already, given that this is probably a very easy way now to afford him after being pretty unaffordable for a lot of people, including me. So you can pocket like 70k going from Fifita to Papali'i. Papali'i has been killing it so far. Don't really need to say any more about that. He's got a break even of 60, so he's probably going to still go up in value as well. So now is probably a decent time to do that trade. Plays in round 13, so I think he's got a lot of pros basically going for Papali'i. One thing I didn't also mention about Fifita is that his break even is 144, so it is pretty high. So say if he does come back in round 12, his break even is pretty high. We've seen obviously he can hit those really, really high scores, but even when he's got a hat trick, he scored 150. So he'd have to score a hat trick against the Sharks, which is possible, just to hold value. So the chances are he's more likely to go down in price. And then if he plays in round 14 with his minutes being managed, you'd expect his price to keep going down with some slightly lower scores. So I think there is an argument to sell, pick him back up on the cheap. So I think trading him to like a Papali'i is a good way to do it. If you already have Papali'i or you don't want to spend that much money, Ryan Madison, his teammate, is also a great candidate, given that he also plays round 13, probably isn't going to be playing Origin. And he's also at a very discounted price at 580k, and his break even 64. So I think he's kind of bottomed out in price, about 100k less than what he was at the start of the season. So I think Madison is also a great pickup if you already have Papali'i, or you're looking to save like 200 extra k by going to Madison instead of Papali'i. So those are probably the 2 key guys I'd want to be targeting if you're looking for round 13 players. You can obviously go for like a James Fisher-Harris as well, who I kind of spoke about last week. He had a big score last week of 84, so he could be a good option, but I still think Papali'i and Madison I would rate ahead of James Fisher-Harris. If you're not as concerned about round 13 and the whole Origin buy period, so say if you're a head-to-head player and you're just looking for like the best option regardless of whether they're playing the bye weeks or not, Tohu Harris is obviously going to be a great option. I picked him up last week and I was really happy to see him score over 100, and he's just super consistent. You know what you're going to get from him, and he's 683k, so you pocket like 200k going from Fifita to Tohu Harris, so that's a really good trade in that sense. Tohu Harris will give you like 75 to 80 points every week, so he's really, really safe. Break even 66, so he probably will match that or go even a little bit higher. Although his price won't probably fluctuate too much. He normally hovers around that kind of mid to 600 price. So I think Tohu Harris is also a great trade and target if you already have, say, a Papali'i and you don't want to go with Madison because maybe you're a bit concerned with his kind of injury history. Another guy who obviously is a bit of a SuperCoach legend is Jason Taumalolo. He had a big score last week with 101. But I think for me, I want to see the minutes consistently higher. I think that was just the one game where he played 71 minutes. I think given the comments we saw from Todd Payton at the start of the season about using him more in that kind of impact role, playing 50 to 55 minutes, I'm less eager to jump on Taumalolo straight away. So I think he's definitely a wait and see for me. But again, Taumalolo could be a great pick up, from say round 14, because the Cowboys will buy in round 13. Those are probably the trade out options I look for Fifita. This is all very applicable for, say, a Mitch Barnett as well. I think before this day Fifita news, a lot of people were looking to trade out Mitch Barnett, and they were looking to like Papali'i, Madison, Tohu Harris, etc. I think with this updated news, a lot of people would probably be looking to hold Mitch Barnett now, given the other fires that they need to put out in their team. I think though, actually, even before all this news, I was probably leaning towards holding him anyway. I think what we've seen so far this season is so many suspensions, injuries, etc. Unless you really are really happy with the rest of your team, it's really hard to kind of trade out, healthy playing guys when we know that we need to have these trades saved for like kind of these suspension kind of things. And the way that Barnett was used last week obviously wasn't ideal, only playing like the 44 minutes I think he played. And he's lost the goal kicking duties. Lockie Fitzgibbon has come back and is looking like he's going to be playing the bigger minutes. And he's really impacting Barnett's role. Although Barnett looked really good coming on in the second half, playing in the middle. The only problem with him playing in the middle is that his attacking stats and the potential for them aren't as good, saying as playing on the edge. But, they've got some pretty decent games coming up against the Tigers and then I think the Cowboys as well. He will goal kick in round 13 and he is a round 13 buy playing player, so that is one advantage to him as well. The only thing I'd note about that whole goal kicking argument is that they're versing the Eels in round 13 and the Eels probably don't have that many players actually going to Origin, so I think their team's going to be pretty near full strength. So the Eels are a great team with a great defense. I don't see how many points the Knights will actually score and how many goal kicks he's going to get. So I would kind of ignore that whole goal kicking in round 13 argument. Obviously it's nice, might give him like 10 to 12 extra points. And his minutes will probably go up in round 13 as well, given that Tyson Frizzell will be going on state of origin duties, as would probably Dan Fifita, you'd expect. So that means, Barnett's minutes will go up in that round 13 week, so he will be a good, handy player for that period. For those kind of reasons, I think I'm leaning towards holding Mitch Barnett, and I think with this news about Fifita, probably still am leaning towards holding. He does have a really high break even though of 98, so he probably will start to leak cash, but I think I'm less concerned about the cash drop. If he's still able to deliver maybe hopefully in the mid 50s, it's handy enough, and I think having that round 13 player will probably be useful in the long run, and I think I'd probably be looking to trade him out then, say at that point around round 14 and round 15, but that would be my general thought on Mitch Barnett. I think he's probably a hold for now, but I don't discourage anyone wanting to sell if you say have somehow avoided a lot of the other carnage this week. So the next little topic I wanted to talk about was the 5-8 dilemmas. I think we've seen obviously with Team Schuster and the injury news that Cam Munster is going to be out for the next couple of weeks, and I think Munster is probably going to be a sell now because he's going to miss at best. Well, he'll miss round 10, he'll miss round 11. He might come back in round 12, which is I think against the Broncos, so it's a good game, but then he'll miss round 13. So I think he's going to miss at least 3 out of the next 4 games, similar to Harry Grant. So I think for that reason, Munster's probably going to be a pretty big trade out this week, and he's so highly owned. I think the question is going to be whether you go downgrade to say like a Tyson Gamble, or do you upgrade to like a gun like a Jerome Luai. I think a similar thing was happening with Josh Schuster, but for different reasons in terms of why he was being traded out. Josh Schuster has a break-even of 83, and he's kind of started to peak. Well, he has basically peaked in price, and so I think people want to be jumping off him before he starts leaking too much cash. He also doesn't play in the round 13 bye week. He'll only play in the round 17 one. So I think for those reasons, a lot of people are looking to sell Josh Schuster. It really is going to be difficult for people who own Munster and Schuster. They might just have to be completely swapping out their 5/8s this week. I own Josh Schuster and I don't own Cam Munster, so I've luckily avoided the Cam Munster injury. But with Schuster, I do have to consider, he is playing against the Broncos this week, which is a good game. And I still honestly have no idea what my trades are going to be at this point. I haven't fully absorbed all the news yet and how I kind of want to change up my team. But in terms of the trade out options for Schuster, I think there's probably 3 main ways that I'd go about it. So I think you really just go for the downgrade to like a Tyson Gamble. Sorry, actually there's going to be 2 ways. So you do the downgrade to Tyson Gamble to free up a lot of money. That makes you 300k just doing that trade alone. Tyson Gamble's got a negative 48 break even. His job security looks pretty good, given that he kind of won that job on merit. With other players being out of form, he's come in and he looks like he's done a pretty decent job. He scored fairly well, in the past couple of games, averaging a 58. I will note though that those were in easier games against the Cowboys and the Titans. They've got some pretty tough games coming up. Manly, Roosters, Melbourne, St. George. mainly Roosters and Melbourne. That's 3 tough games, you'd say. But he's got pretty decent base of around 32. I did plug it into the price change calculator tool on NRL SuperCoach stats. Definitely want to check that out. I'll put a link for that in the description below. If he averaged his base, all the games up until say round 17, he'd make 85k. And I usually think with cash cows, you're usually aiming for about 100k. I don't think he'd be averaging just 32 as well. That's purely just on his base. So I think if you throw on a few attacking stats here and there, I think he's going to be relatively safe to make 100k. So I think he is a good trade target for this week. And I think doing a Josh Schuster move down to Tyson Gamble is a pretty decent move if you're really looking to free up money to do some big upgrades. Although I do think with this day Fifita news, it's less kind of pertinent now, given that Fifita to anyone else is really going to free up quite a bit of money. So I think a lot of people will then be leaning towards, say, the gun upgrade. So like a Josh Schuster and a Cam Munster to like a Jerome Luai, who I think is going to be the prime candidate. Given that Cody Walker's just coming off a game where he scored 16, his break-even is going to be pretty high. And the Rabbitohs also don't play in round 13, but the Panthers do. And it really then comes down to whether you think that Luai is going to play State of Origin or not for New South Wales. Personally, I have a feeling that he will play. I hope he doesn't because he's in my team. But I have a feeling he will play given the form that he's shown. But I think if you're looking just to maximize points, I would probably advocate the Schuster and Munster move to a Jerome Luai, who's priced at 617k, so very similar to Munster as well. Obviously, you have to fork out a little bit extra money going from Schuster to Luai. But the run of games for the Panthers is amazing. You know, they've got the Titans, Rabbitohs is pretty tough, but then they've got Bulldogs in round 12. That alone, Luai could score 120 plus, which might make the trade worth it all in itself. And then if he doesn't play in State of Origin, he'll have the West Tigers in round 13. So I think Luai is a fantastic pickup as well. I'm very happy to own him, and I would definitely advocate, like say if you like the Cam Munster, I would do the Cam Munster to Jerome Luai. If you're only looking to do Josh Schuster, I'd probably do Josh Schuster to Tyson Gamble, but it also just depends on who your second 5'8" is. Like in my case, if you got a Cody Walker or a Schuster, you'd probably do the Schuster down to Gamble. Or obviously if you're like me with a Luai Schuster, you'd probably just do the Schuster to Gamble and probably keep it at that. Originally, I did also want to chat about Adam Doueihi as well, who has shown really good form in the past few weeks. Scored a massive 142. Unfortunately, he has been named in the centres this round. We have up until Friday to see, if that's going to be the case in the final team sheet. Fortunately, the Tigers do play the first game of the round, so we'll be able to get confirmation of that. If he still is named in the centres, I don't really want to be considering him then, I guess, at that point. Not that I don't think he's going to be able to score, but just that uncertainty in position kind of throws me off a little bit. I mean, it's really a shame because he's probably got the best run after Luai with the Knights, Warriors, Dragons coming up. And he's got a negative 18 break even, so he's probably going to go up in price. I think this will probably throw off a lot of people. And the thing with the Doueihi is that, yes, he will play in round 13, but their run from round 13 after is pretty bad. They've got the Panthers, the Eels, the Storm, and then the Rabbitohs, and then they bye. So really, how many points are you going to be expecting from him? Obviously, that's a bit of a longer term thing. But with Doueihi, I think that being named at centre probably does throw me off just enough. And I think that really tough run from round 13 would probably lean me just to go in for a Tyson Gamble or a Jerome Luai if you're looking to trade out Schuster or Munster. So I think another guy that a lot of people are going to be looking to sell or were thinking about it maybe before all the carnage happened was Connor Watson. He's suffering from the same impact of Lachlan Fitzgibbon coming back into the night side. Only playing the 40 minutes last week, which really isn't enough, I think, to warrant, continued selection in our team. But given all the stuff that we know now, I think the prime candidates, it also depends on where you have, Connor Watson in your team. I've kind of already gone through some of the 5'8" options, and I think if Connor Watson is listed in your 5'8", I think there's probably more options in terms of trading him out to, like a Tyson Gamble, for example, or upgrading to a Luai. I think if you're like me, you've got Connor Watson in your hooker position, it becomes a little bit more difficult, I think. The reason is, firstly, Harry Grant was probably the main candidate that I think a lot of people were going to be targeting, but he suffered similar fate to Cam Munster. He's going to be out for the next 2 weeks at least. He might play in round 12 against the Broncos, but then he'll also miss in round 13, and he might, his minutes might get managed during the State of Origin period. And then they might just try to ramp him up to the back end of the season up until the finals. So Harry Grant, his minutes might be fluctuating. We obviously know that he can score heaps and heaps of points. Even if you just give him 40 minutes and a half, he can score over 100. We've seen that already so far this season coming off the bench. but I think there's too much risk, and obviously you wouldn't be looking to bring him in now when he's going to be missing games. So I think Harry Grant is off the table in terms of a Connor Watson replacement. So I think there's a few others then you'd be looking at. Reid Marnie, who has performed really, really well to begin the season. I think the question mark over him though is that, well, firstly, he's got a really high break even of 108, just coming off that failed HIA. So I don't think he necessarily is a candidate straight away for this week. Also with Connor Watson, his break even is 60, which I think is still fairly manageable. And I think Connor Watson, more likely than Barnett, will more likely be able to get attacking stats against some of these easier teams than, say, a Mitch Barnett, given Connor Watson kind of probably has a bit more attacking flair in his game. So I think he's probably more likely to reach his break-even of 60 than, say, a Barnett is to reach a 98. So I think Connor Watson is probably going to be a little bit more of a hold, potentially. I know he's named off the bench, but I think he can probably do more in those minutes off the bench, given that his average base per minute is also higher than Mitch Barnett's. So in terms of going up to Reid Marnie, there's also that question mark that, well, if there is continued injuries with Harry Grant, Reid Marnie is probably going to be the next option for Queensland. So that whole benefit of, Reid Marnie playing in round 13 and not playing in Origin will be voided at that point in time. I still think it's okay to go from like Connor Watson to Reid Marnie, but definitely we'll just keep that in the back of your mind if you are looking to seriously make that jump from Connor Watson to Reid Marnie. I put in Jayden Brailey as well. I think just in case if people don't have him or didn't jump on him, I think Jayden Brailey is obviously going to be a very safe hooker option to go for. He won't play in round. He will play in round 13, and he won't play State of Origin. And last week we saw him get a massive 92, and so he's hovering around an average of 74, which is very, very solid. And 550k is pretty reasonably priced. I think it's a little bit cheaper than Harry Grant and Reid Marnie. His break-even's also 47, which is a lot more manageable. So he's probably going to go up a little bit in price. So I think if you don't own Jayden Brailey at this point, Connor Watson to Jayden Brailey upgrade, in my opinion, is a good move. Brailey is going to be playing 80 minutes, you'd expect, every week, and will probably be likely to get some attacking stats with these easy games coming up in the next few weeks. One guy I will also touch on is Api Coruscant. So he's probably a bit of a forgotten man in the hooker position. He's only just come back from injuries and he hasn't really produced that big score so far this season, but his minutes are starting to increase a little bit. He also plays in round 13, and as I mentioned with Jerome Luai, Panthers draw coming up is really, really fantastic. I don't think Coruscant is going to play State of Origin, so I don't necessarily think that Connor Watson move, if you've got in your hooker position, is an immediate for this week. I think there's enough question marks over some of the guys, like say Reid Marnie and obviously no Harry Grant, and with an easy game for the Knights against the Tigers, with Connor Watson potentially just being a hold for at this point in time. And if you say Coruscant jumps out as a great option to upgrade to, then I think then you could make a Connor Watson to Coruscant move at that point. So I think Connor Watson for myself, I'm probably looking to hold, especially with all the carnage that's happened this week. In my view, he was probably more of a hold compared to say a Barnett, which does sound surprising, but I just feel like I've got more faith in his potential to get attacking stats compared to say a Barnett. So I think definitely Connor Watson will probably be looking to hold for this week at least, but I don't begrudge people selling. That minutes really is a bit of a shame, and I think another week to see how it shapes up as well will probably be more beneficial for us owners as well in terms of making our decision to sell him or not. So this section I put together was probably not going to be as relevant this week after hearing all the news about the injuries and suspensions to key players, but it was about kind of burning trades on switching around fullbacks. It's a bit of a discussion that I've had with people on Twitter. Subtle plug, if you haven't already, check out my link below to my Twitter account. Follow me there because I'm very active on there now during the week. But this whole kind of concept of switching around your fullbacks, because it's very clear that the fullback spot is where we get the most points week in, week out, and being able to capitalize on the best draws coming up for fullbacks. And because we saw, if you can nail that captaincy pick, you can get a Clint Gutherson 140, Tom Turbo 191, Pappenhausen when he went off for his 197, etc. And those really make or break your scores every week. Last week was a week where I didn't captain Turbo, and that really hit me hard. So I just put the draw here for all the kind of key fullback considerations here. And one thing I think is important to note is the draw for a lot of them is actually really, really nice. So Tedesco, who's obviously someone who's really underperformed in the past few weeks, people who are thinking about selling him, he's 516k now. If you sell now, you're losing like 350k, I think, on what you bought him for at the start of the season. And he's coming up against the Cowboys and the Broncos and then the Raiders, who have shown, being able to leak points as well. So I think that's a very decent 3-game stretch for Tedesco. You'd probably still hold him for this period of time as well. And I put in the calculator as well. If he averages 100 in the next 3 games, he'll go back up to like a 624k price, which is a little bit more, digestible in terms of selling him. I think for me, I'm definitely going to probably sell him in round 13, given that the Roosters are very cautious with their star players. And then in rounds 15, 16, I believe the Roosters play the Panthers and the Storm. Two tough games that I probably don't want Tedesco for. And this is kind of what I'm talking about. I think jumping on players who have the best draw, especially with the fullback spot, is going to be really, really key. So say, for example, if you look at the next, say, month or so, you would look at that and say, if you're like probably what I think a lot of people might have is like a Teddy Turbo combination. Obviously you're pretty happy with Turbo and you probably captain him this week. Then he's got the Eels and the Knights, which are tough-ish. And at that point in time, it could be ludicrous to say, I'm going to sell Turbo. But if you're in a fortunate position where, say, you've saved quite a few trades and you've got, built up quite a lot of value in Tom Turbo, after these massive scores bumping up his price, you look at that and say, okay, I want to keep him for the game against the Broncos. Maybe he pumps out 150, and then I'm going to switch to Pappenhausen after that, because Pappenhausen's versing the Raiders, who've shown an ability to leak a lot of points. Then Pappenhausen's got the Broncos, so Pappenhausen with the goal kicking might go 150, 160 himself. It might seem sideways to go, I'm going to go Turbo to Pappenhausen, but if you're willing to make those kind of trades and really jump on those big points that are on offer, that really can benefit you in terms of your overall points. The only consideration though is that you've got you're burning through a lot of trades at the point in time, and those are going to be really crucial. So you really have to kind of weigh up how valuable the trade is versus the potential points that are on offer. But this is kind of like that's like a brief example of what I'd be kind of talking about. And I think it becomes more relevant as we look into the State of Origin period, given, say, like a Teddy who's got really tough games in between, round 15, 16. It makes perfect sense, I think, at that point to jump on like a Turbo or a Pappenhausen, who I think have got more favourable fixtures in that period of time. One guy I also did want to mention is Latrell Mitchell. So he's got his last game of suspension this round, but he comes back in round 11. But the games for the Rabbitohs from round 11 to 13 are pretty tough, and I expect Latrell to be involved in State of Origin as well. But the draw from round 14 is very, very nice for Latrell. So again, kind of what I'm touching on, if you want to sell Tedesco in round 13, it might not make any sense to go to a Latrell, but if you are happy to sit Teddy in round 13, jump on like a Latrell and say around 14, where his draw is really, really nice. Making that switch will enable you to jump on big points on offer with a Latrell, and he's probably going to be a serious pod. And I think doing this kind of fullback hopping, if you can accommodate it with the trades, would really benefit you in the long terms in terms of the points, the points that you can score. It just really comes down to weighing up the trades that are on that we have left for the season. So I kind of wanted to finish up on a few other questions that I might have seen on the forums and in my Twitter as well, but I don't think are going to be as relevant now given all the carnage that we've seen, as a common theme that I'm saying in this video. Angus Crichton was a person I think a lot of people were looking at selling. He's got a 3-round average of 62, which is fine, not nothing spectacular, and that was boosted by one try he got in his not the last match, but the match before. Games against the Cowboys and the Broncos and the Raiders, as I mentioned, I think there are points on offer for Angus Crichton, and I think a lot of people are probably going to have more pressing issues in their team now. So I think he's probably a fine hold for the next couple of weeks, but I would look to get rid of him in round 13. Otherwise, I think there's enough even like cheaper second-row forwards like a Josh Curran who might be able to match the points in round 13. So he might just be one that you just sit on your bench for that week. Kurt Capel as well, missing a week. I think he's likely to be a trade out before round 13 anyway, given that he's probably going to play in Origin and he's not really looking like a season keeper. I think he's an immediate trade out for this week. He's not going to change in price given he's missing the week. But I think if you can flip even like a Kurt Capel to like a Ryan Madison, if you've got the right dual players, is a great trade. Personally, I honestly have not decided what I'm going to do this week. Capel might be someone I trade, but given that I've got Bailey Simonson who is coming up against the Bulldogs, I think I'm happy to play Simonson in place of Capel and just leave him on my bench for the week. In terms of other cheapies, I only really mentioned Tyson Gamble. This week there's not so many, given that Zach Sini has been dropped out of the 17 for the Tigers. Max Fiunga is probably the only guy who is a cheapie who's playing his third game this week. But there are definitely some job security issues with him, with Cody Ramsey and Jordan Pereira kind of looming in the background. And I expect one of those two will take the wing spot, and Fiunga will drop out of the 17 altogether. So I don't think I'd be going for Fiunga myself. Nico Hines is actually a really, really good pickup, and anyone who jumped on him a couple of weeks back, they've really, really lucked out because obviously he scored really well in those games. With this injury to Cam Munster though, I would expect Hines is probably going to be playing in the number 6 role for the next few weeks, and so he's shown an ability to score a lot of points. It is a bit of a risk given that he's been named at number 1, but we might expect some late switching to happen in the Storm's team. Whether he plays at number 6 or goes to the bench, we don't know at this stage. I would assume he's playing at number 6, and if he does, that means that there's potentially a lot of points on offer, coming up against the Dragons. So I think if you can wait it out up until that point in time to trade him in, I would probably do that once you've got confirmation. If not, I think he's still an okay pickup because he will play in the round 13 bye week, and he's shown an ability to score quite a bit of points. So I'll just quickly also go through the vice captain and the captain candidates for this week. So I think Tigers versus the Knights, Kalen Ponga becomes a really easy vice captain. They've conceded the 3rd most points to fullbacks the Tigers have, and Ponga's just coming back off 107, so I think he's a great VC option. Tom Taforovic coming up against the Broncos on the Friday as well, who are the 2nd worst team at defending fullbacks. Tom Taforovic coming off 191. I think if you don't own, Ponga, for me, Turbo is a must-have VC. There's so many other there's so many other good captaincy options that I wouldn't risk just putting the captaincy straight on him. Although it sounds silly to say it's a risk to captain Turbo after knowing what he's doing, but I think just having that vice captain loophole, especially with a lot of players out this week, that might give you a good opportunity to do that vice captain loophole. So I would probably lean to doing a vice captain on him if you do own him, but otherwise if you throw the big C on him, I don't think you're really doing yourself any harm. Cody Walker, I'm tipping him to have a bit of a bounce back game against the Sharks, who are the 4th worst team at defending fullbacks, which is where Cody Walker has been named. Having Reynolds back in their team, I think, is really going to help the Rabbitohs out, and I think Cody Walker is a decent shout as well if you're looking for more of a pod kind of vice captain or captain option. For the Roosters against the Cowboys, I think the 2 standouts here were going to be Sam Walker and James Tedesco. Sam Walker, if he's named, Cowboys have been the worst team at defending the halfback position. Sam Walker is goal kicking as well, so that really does boost his potential. We only saw just a couple of weeks back him score 163, so we know he's got that ability to go really big. So I think he's a decent, captaincy shout. Even, I wouldn't even call him a cheapie anymore. He's priced almost at like 500k or something like that. And James Tedesco, obviously, I don't think I'd be captaining Tedesco as much as I love the guy. Even though the Cowboys are the 5th worst team at defending fullbacks, I'm not seeing quite enough yet, I think, to warrant captaining him. Happy to hold him and play him, but I don't think I'm going to be captaining him when I've got probably other better options in my team. For the Eels, I think Clint Gutherson is a decent captaincy shout. The Warriors are the worst team at defending fullbacks as well. Probably a lot of that probably comes from Tom Turbo's 191, so read into that what you will. But I think Gutherson, after a quiet game, has got an ability to bounce back. Probably one person I haven't mentioned in this particular table is Zay Papali'i, who's coming up against his old team. That always is a strong motivator, and I really do believe in that in terms of the player's performance. And so he's obviously shown an ability to go 100 plus pretty regularly. So I think Papali'i is also a decent captaincy shout, even though I haven't got him in this table here. For the Storm, I've got Ryan Papenhuyzen here. This is assuming that he is going to be playing in the final 17 for the Storm. The Dragons have been the 6th worst at defending fullbacks, and I think Papenhuyzen has shown his ceiling so far this season. So if you've held Papenhuyzen up until this point and you get confirmation, if you can put the big captaincy on him on Sunday, that's a massive pod move. And I think, that's one of those moves that you really want to be going for. A gun player who we know can go large, who's not going to be highly owned. If you can captain him, like double down on that ownership, that really can swing in your favor if that player goes large. So I really like having a captaincy on Papenhuyzen. Probably what I'm maybe likely to do is Nathan Cleary captain against the Titans. Titans without Fifita is going to be a big loss for them, and I think the Panthers are on that much of a roll. We've seen the Titans defend so many points as well. We've seen the Titans concede so many points. They're the 10th worst team at defending halfback, so they've been pretty good, but I think Penrith are a different animal altogether, and I think Cleary's probably going to be a safe 100 plus in this game as well, so I think he's a very safe captaincy option. Although I haven't fully decided yet what I'm going to do, it'll be someone out of this list. So in the final part of the video, I thought I'd just go through the player break-evens for all the teams. Tyson Gamble for the Broncos, I think, is obviously the main trading target with that negative 48 break-even. Jesse Arthurs, who I mentioned last week, he's probably going to go up in value as well. But I think there are also some job security issues with Tony Staggs potentially coming back soon. So I don't think he's an ideal cash cow, but if you're looking to make a quick buck, you can go for a Jesse Arthurs. Jermaine Osako still also got a negative 15 break even, so for anyone who's still got him, wouldn't be selling him, given that he's probably going to go up still a little bit more in value, and he does play in round 13, so I think if you still got him at this point, I'll just probably continue to hold. In terms of the other big guys to go for, like a Payne Haas and a Fifita Pangai Jr., they've got break evens of 72 and 77 respectively, so Payne Haas I'd expect is probably going to kind of teeter around this price now. He probably would average around the 70 mark, so I think still a good time to bring him in, although he will probably play in Origin, so that's something to factor in, but I think you can just lock him into your front row forward, set and forget for the rest of the season. Fifita Pangai Jr. with that kind of lowish score from last week with a 77 break even, he hopefully might be a little bit more affordable for anyone who didn't get him in the past couple of weeks, so I still think he's a good trade in target as well. If you're looking for a day for Fifita, you can go down to a Fifita Pangai Jr. if you didn't go for him already. On the Bulldog side, honestly, I'm not going to talk about anyone. There's no one really I'm that interested in from the Bulldogs. With the Raiders, similar story. I mean, a Bailey Simonson has got a negative 19 break even. Finally, we're going to see some cash rises out of him after that good score from last week. He might even be a play for me this week, given that they're coming up against the Bulldogs. If you can't score points against the Bulldogs, then I've got no hope for him. Corey Harry-Onaira coming up against his old team as well. He's got a 13 break even, so he's probably going to go up a little bit in value, but he only scored a 34, I think, from memory last week, so he didn't set the world on fire. He has been named to start at number 11 for them, but as I said plenty of times, I'm not that interested in these Raiders forwards. I just don't like the fluctuation too much. And Ryan James, who has been named on the bench, he's got a break even of 56, so he's probably not going to meet that coming off the bench, so he's probably going to drop a little bit in price. So I think if you've created a lot of money doing, say, like a Schuster to a gamble, you could do like a Ryan James upgrade, but I imagine a lot of people probably be prioritizing like a day for Fifita trade out first. On the Dragons, as I mentioned, Max Fiangai has a break even of -8, so he will go up in value this week, but as I mentioned, I think there are some job security issues with him, so I don't think I'd be going for him. His brother Matt Fiangai, don't get confused, if you are bringing one of the Fiangai brothers in, he's got a -50 break even, but he's out of the 17 altogether, so don't consider him. And I think the one guy who might pique some interest as well is Jack Bird. He's got a break even of 25, so he's still going to go up in value, you'd expect, with a couple of good games, but he is coming up against the Storm this week, so I think he doesn't have to be brought in this week, but definitely one to watch in the coming weeks with their decent draw coming up. With the Sea Eagles, Jason Saab, can you believe it, has got a negative 23 break even. He's going to go up in price. I can't believe I sold him. I should have just kept him. He's been the best performing cash cow out of Staines, Saab, Simonson, for Satua. So yeah, it's I sold him, and obviously I wish I held. So anyone who's still got him, just continue to hold, and he should go up in value for you. And he should maybe even make like 150, 200k. So he's a great trade out target to make some money before round 13. Tom Tavovic as well, got a break even of 15, price at 758k. I think if you do want to get him in, really it does become a case of you should bring him in this week because he's coming up against the Broncos. His price is going to go a little bit not out of reach, but it's going to get really, really high soon as well. I think if you are wanting to get him in, this has to be the week to get him in. On the Storm side, Josh Adekar's got that negative 21 break even after that massive game. Nico Hines got a negative 3 break even, so he's probably going to go up still in value, so I think it's still a good week to pick him up, and especially with all these injuries at the Storm, I think he will find a place there where he's probably scoring some decent points as well. And Ryan Pappenhausen, who's coming back, got a break even of 130, so it's quite high. We know that he can easily pass that in any game, but I'm hoping that he's not quite able to match that, just coming back from an injury, and he can go down in price for us and we can pick him up a little bit later, kind of around that State of Origin period actually, because I think playing in the number 14 role for the Blues, which is what I expect, he probably will hopefully play less minutes and back up in those games after State of Origin for the Storm a little bit easier than these guys playing the full 80. On the night side of things, the main guys, I think maybe is like a David Clemmer, got a break even of 53, which is kind of what he's been averaging in the past few weeks. He's nicely priced at 477k, but I haven't seen enough out of him in the last few weeks to warrant bringing him in at this stage. And Bradman Best got a break even of 99. So I, unfortunately, anyone who brought him in last week, I was really big on him. Maybe I cursed him by, telling people to bring him in. 99 break even at 476k. He's really, really going to drop in value. So if you are still looking to get him in, he might come really, really cheap in the next few weeks. On the Cowboy side, I think the main guy to talk about is probably going to be a Ben Condon. He's got a break even of 80. So I think and coming off the bench again this week, I think he really becomes a sell and a sell soon, because he's going to start leaking a lot of cash. I think even if he scored a try, he's still going to get around 70, 75. So he's still going to go down in value. Coming off the bench, lower base stats, I think he has to be a sell candidate. I won't really talk too much more about the Eels guys. I think I spent quite a bit of time on them already so far in this video. On the Panthers, fortunately, Charlie Sands got a negative 12 break even, so he's going to go up in value. Thank you, Charlie. You're going to make us some money finally. Liam Martin is actually quite interesting with a negative 8 break even, 393k. It becomes very kind of attractive, especially with the injury to Kurt Capewell. You could potentially do like a straight swap from a Kurt Capewell to a Liam Martin. That gives you like 50, 60k, I think. Liam Martin will play in the round 13 bye week, and he's shown an ability to find the try line as well. So if you're looking for a real pod mover, in that mid-range second row forward, you could feasibly do like a Kurt Capewell to a Liam Martin, and he should hopefully cover you well for the round 13 bye period. The problem, I guess, will just be in the next few weeks, say rounds 11, 12. If he's coming off the bench, if Capewell is fit, his points are probably going to be hovering around like the 30 to 40, which is not ideal. On the Shark side, again, I don't think there's too many interesting Supercoach options here. Probably the main one I'll be looking at is Sean Johnson, 104 break even. I'm happy to see him score less and less, and his price to go down. Pick him up nice and juicy in like round 14 or 15. Which is when I think the Sharks draw becomes really, really nice, and he could be like the second gun 5'8" that you pair up with like a Jerome Luai. On the Rabbitohs side of things, I think there's not really too much to talk about. I think Damien Cook, if anyone's still holding, I think he's pretty a safe sell. Break even of 86, and he doesn't look close to meeting that, and he's losing so much money. I think doing a Damien Cook to like a Jaden Brayley, if you don't have Brayley already, or if you've got a Connor Watson, you can kind of flip players around. You can use Damien Cook to downgrade to like a Tyson Gamble and make yourself a lot of money. On the Roosters, a guy who I quite like is Sitili Tupanua. He's got a -5 break even. He's going to go up quite a bit in value. He's named again for this week. The Cowboys and the Broncos in the next couple of weeks. Very, very attractive games for Tupanua, who might get some attacking stats and some tries to his name. So that really will bump up his score. So I think he's a very good trade target in this week as well. If you're looking for more of a cut price mid-range second row forward, I'd probably prefer him to Liam Martin in all honesty, except for the fact that Liam Martin does play in round 13. Siusia Takeaho, who has been named off the bench, which isn't ideal, and he's not goal kicking from what we understand. He's got a break even of 60, which is like, it's okay, it's manageable. He probably is going to maybe score around the 50 to 55, so I don't think his price is going to go down too much. So I don't think he's like a priority sell, but definitely if he does continue to look like he's coming off the bench or he's not goal kicking, he becomes a sell at some stage. But I don't think you have to rush into trading him out at this stage. But obviously, I think he's a safe candidate if you're trading him out to like an Isaiah Papali'i. On the Titans side, I think the main person that everyone's going to be thinking of is like a Dave Fifita. I've already given my thoughts whether you should sell or not. The other guy's probably a Tino, who again had a pretty poor game last week, only scoring a 45. He's got a break even of 73, and I think he'll play Origin, so I think it's probably time to cut your losses with Tino and upgrade to like a Papali'i or a Madison, depending if you've got him in your front row forward or second row forward. For the Warriors, I think the main guy that a lot of people are going to be looking to bring in is maybe like a Josh Curran to Harris. I still think Curran is a good trade and target. He's got a break even of 2. At 345k, he's shown the ability to smash out like 55, 65 plus scores. So I think he's still putting out scores that are, comparable enough to like keeper scores, and he's a very good player in the round 17 bye week, which you shouldn't forget. So I think Curran is still a good trade and target. Tohu Harris, give my thoughts, he's always going to be a good trade and target. He's got a break even of 66, so he's probably going to go up a little bit in value. To expect him to score a little bit above that. But apart from that, I don't think there's too many other interesting players in terms of Supercoach from the Warriors. Finally, for the Tigers, I think the main one is Adam Dewey with that -18 break even, but him being named at the centers is really, really off-putting. I think he's still okay to bring in. Obviously, it depends if he is eventually named at 5'8" again this week, then I think he's a good trade and target, but being named at centers does throw me off just a little bit. Jake Simpkin got a break even of 5, but unfortunately he's not playing this week. I think we've seen enough rotation in that if you can avoid selling him, you can get away with holding him. There's a good chance that he comes straight back into the Tigers team sometime soon, so I don't think you have to rush to be trading him out sometime soon. Well, that's it, guys. That is the round 10 trade targets and preview. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. It might be a bit of a longer video, but there was a lot of stuff that you had to get through this week. There was so much carnage. So I really hope that you guys enjoyed this and found some value out of it. If you did, would really appreciate a thumbs up on the video. As I said, do please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. The goal is still to get to 1,000 by, why not just make it the round 13 bye week since we're talking about it so much, or make it the end of the season. Either way, I'm really appreciative of all the support to this point. Good luck for round 10, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.